Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Book Trek 2021. This is a BookTube event that I'm embarked on, a 5-month mission with a bunch of other intrepid BookTubers in which we are reading Star Trek fiction for the rest of the year. Started out with the original series in August. Now we're reading The Next Generation, which is a weak spot for me, that I mean to strengthen. This is a series, an incarnation of the show that I've never particularly liked. And I think I've gone many decades believing that I have perfectly good reasons not to like it. There are a whole bunch of what I consider to be basic casting and dramatic missteps. And I am taking the month of September as an opportunity to flesh out that reaction. I'm reading a lot of Next Generation novels to see what writers do with it. I'm also, maybe a little more to the point, watching a lot of Next Generation episodes and movies, watching a lot of that to sort of catch the bits and pieces of character stuff that might come across no better in the Next Generation novels than they often do in the original series novels. So I'm continuing to read the novels. September's only halfway done, so I have plenty more to go. I'm continuing to watch the show in an attempt to sort of figure out a way to like this incarnation of Star Trek, and it's largely working, I'm pleased to report. Today's book is by David Galanter and Greg Broder, and it's called Foreign Foes. And the basic premise is that Captain Jean-Luc Picard and the Enterprise are negotiating a peace between the Huron people and the Klingon Empire, who've been at war for almost 100 years and are inveterate blood foes. Now keep in mind, this is the Next Generation, so the Klingon Empire and the Federation are allies. They signed a peace treaty at the Khitomer Accords in the Star Trek movie that we all know so well, and have been allies ever since. To the extent that a Klingon can actually be a member of Picard's command crew on the flagship of the Federation. You get the impression in the run of the Next Generation that that's not exactly a completely bed of roses alliance, that it's prickly, as you'd expect, from two vast spacefaring civilizations who had been enemies for an entire generation. That kind of tension boils over at a couple of points in the Next Generation, and of course sunders completely for a moment there in Deep Space Nine, when the Klingons pull out of the Khitomer Accords and go to war. You have to figure, though, when I was reading this novel, I was thinking, well, you have to figure this would be part of the baggage that you would take on if you had Klingons as your allies. The Klingons were a bloodthirsty, aggressive, territorially imperialistic group. They didn't have anything like the Prime Directive. The Federation is entirely voluntary. The Klingon Empire is not. So you're going to have to deal with the fallout of that if you have them as your allies. And this book basically deals with that. There's some personal stuff as well. The reason that Riker and Deanna Troi, are on the cover here is because they have a bit of a subplot. I didn't think that the novel, despite it having two authors, I didn't think it was all that effective. The parts that weren't predictable weren't particularly good, and the parts that were a little bit fleshed out had really nothing to do with the book, nothing to do with the plot. So it wasn't a memorable thing at all. I actually think I remember reading this as a paperback when it came out originally. This is number 31. Number 31 in the Next Generation. The Next Generation novels went up a long way. So I think I remember reading this and just dismissing it. There isn't much to it. In terms of a novel, that's the price you pay when you're reading Star Trek fiction. A lot of it is not good. As our dauntless captain, Vin, at Revenant Reads, said right at the beginning, it's largely comfort food. It's largely about reading a novel and imagining if you'd seen an episode to that effect. This very much reads like an episode of The Next Generation, with maybe a little bit bigger budget, although I could certainly come up with ways to film this exact same book with a minimum budget. There are all sorts of ways you could do that. So enjoyable, but mainly for me in terms of the larger questions that it raises. The Klingons, I think, are the most interesting part of the Next Generation. I've always said that each incarnation of Star Trek fleshes out something some aspect of the original premise of the show. I think that oftentimes that's an alien race. I think that the original show gives us the Vulcans. I think that the Next Generation gives us the Klingons. They're introduced in the original series, but in the Next Generation, we learn to know what they're like as a people, as a culture, as an empire. And that there's a little bit of that added here. We get quite a bit of that in this book. It wasn't written with anything like what I would call flair, and I was missing that by the halfway point. So my book today, Foreign Foes, is not all that great a success to write home about. We'll see. We'll see if we have any more luck tomorrow. Because Book Trek is continuing. My co-hosts are busy people. They have jobs and families and loved ones and school and children and personal hygiene. So they are busy people. They will get around to posting more videos in the month of September. And so will I. I plan on having a video tomorrow. I will read a Star Trek book tonight. A Next Generation novel, I should say. I should specify, because I got a Star Trek book yesterday that very much occupied me throughout the night. But it's not technically a Next Generation book, so it doesn't really work in Book Trek. It'll have to work somewhere else in my videos today, because I can't not talk about it. But we'll see. Every night before I start my reading, I sort of fly through at random, Wheel of Fortune style, my Next Generation ebooks to see which will be the next one. And I'm gonna do that tonight. So we will see what tomorrow will bring. I will wrap this up for now. I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.